Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and it's full review time on the Brian Brown Raptor. The Raptor is the latest production knife that has shipped and been delivered to people from Brian Brown Knives. There is a new small little tiny folder coming out from him soon. I'm blanking on the name of it at the moment, and it's not done with Reat, it's done with USP or something, maybe Best Tech, I don't know. It's coming out from somebody else. Tuya, maybe Tuya's doing it. I don't remember, but this is one of the Reat ones. I also have and adore, grab it out of the case, the Jaeger. The Jaeger M is one of my favorite production knives built by Reat ever. It's just exceptional. If you're wondering whether I like the Raptor as much of the Jaeger, no, I do not. If you want the quick gist of it, if I were to recommend a Brian Brown production knife, the Jaeger non-flipper is so good. That said, the Raptor is excellent. We're going to talk a lot about it. I like the Raptor a lot, but I don't like it as much as the Jaeger, if I had to pick a favorite child from Brian Brown. So anyway, this version is the black PVD blade with speed holes on a bronze anodized frame. It's a really dark bronze. Yeah, you get all bronze hardware, these kind of bronzed out pivot collars, bronze studs. Everything is kind of pretty bronzed out, and then the blade is that PVD black coated. It's got a nice hollow grind. Yeah, so titanium. M390, or did he use 20CV? I don't remember. It's one of the two, and I don't see it marked anywhere. But an M390 or equivalent steel. And yeah, this is pretty cool. So I pre-ordered this as soon as they became available. I jumped on the pre-order. I knew I wanted one. This was the spec that I wanted, so I'm really glad that I was able to get it. And it was a waiting game, and I've had this knife now for about a month. I've carried it a lot. I've used it a lot. Not a ton, but I've used it, I guess, kind of a lot. Yeah. It's been in pocket quite a few times. I've been enjoying putting this knife through its paces. Every now and then there's a knife where I just don't click with it a ton, and I still want to make sure that I use it enough to review it well. And then there's other knives where it's I enjoy the process of getting to this point where I'm able to speak about it from a place of experience. So yeah, let's just kind of jump in. Ergonomically, for my hand, this knife is money. I wasn't expecting this knife to be as comfortable in hand as it is. The way that this handle is shaped, I thought was maybe going to be too thin in this section, or the curve maybe wasn't going to agree with me, or maybe my hands would land in a funky spot with this transition back here. Nope, none of that's true. It's just for my medium-sized gloves, but fill them out real well hands, this thing is stupid comfortable. I love it. It really, really, in a saber grip especially, is just excellent. Hammer grip, also really good. Draw cut, somehow really good. Reverse grip, very good. Reverse grip draw cut is fine. Ergonomically, this knife for my hands is a win. I really, really like it. The way that this little bit of a ramp is done as well, it's got a little bit of jimping on it. I could take or leave the jimping, but the shape, the way that this curve kind of continues up through here, it's good. It's good in a saber grip. I really like it. You can also, in my experience, choke up a little bit, kind of use this flat / little choil thing as a finger choil-ish area if you need to. I've used it this way a handful of times if I'm making kind of a precise little cut, cutting rubber bands off of Barbies for my daughter or something. It works well in that way, but it's certainly not where I think your hand is designed to live. Back here is locked in. It feels really, really good. So I like the ergos on this knife a lot. Honestly, that might be the one thing it has over the Jaeger even for me. This handle fits my hand even better than the Jaeger does, which is kind of crazy to say because I love the Jaeger ergos. I love the non-flipper in particular because I kind of live up here. And I mean, this feels really good in my hand too now that I'm holding it. But gun to my head, which one's more comfortable? The Raptor is a little bit more comfortable for my hand. All right, so ergos. Let's talk carry. Carry profile on this guy is pretty good. It's fairly thin as knives go this way. It's pretty thin this way. It's kind of noticeably thin, if that makes sense. Like it feels like a thin knife in pocket. The pocket clip is not going to be a deep carry loop over clip or anything like that, but it is set pretty high up the handle, so you get that much knife sticking out of your pocket, which is tolerable for me. I don't mind that. The pocket clip itself has good retention. It's smooth in and out of pocket. No hang-ups or anything like that. Nothing funky going on under the clip. It's just comfortable and convenient to slip in and out of pocket. It's comfortable once it's in there. Everything is kind of contoured as well. If you look closely, you can see that we've got some curve happening here. So yeah, it's very smooth. It's just nice. There's no flipper tab sticking out. I like to carry this knife. This one with the speed holes, I imagine, is the lightest version of the knife because there's a bunch of titanium removed. There is still, on the lock side, some lightning pockets milled out in there, so that has relieved some weight as well. Maybe on the one without the speed holes, there's milling on the show side too. I don't know because I only have this version. But yeah, it feels good. Feels fairly light. It's not an overly heavy knife. Especially this blade stock is actually a little on the thick side, and it's a decent sized blade. I happen to have my ruler here again. I'm not like a specs guy, but let's see. Yeah, we're like 3.45, like just under 3.5 inches on the blade length. So yeah, I like it. It feels balanced. It feels good, and in pocket it's comfortable. So we've talked ergos and carry. Let's talk cutting. This blade shape I find to be pretty freaking functional. It's just a nice hollow grind that's taken quite thin right behind the edge, especially for being a pretty robust stock. It's not as laser beam thin right behind the edge as the Jaeger is, but it's done quite well. The PVD finish has held up really, really great. I've done a good amount of cutting with this knife. Put it through a couple apples, a bunch of cardboard, a lot of packaging things, little plastic clamshell packages and rubber bands and little zip ties and stuff like that, and it's done well for all of it. The blade feels predictable in a way that is nice, the way it indexes with these ergos. It's just a good, dependable EDC cutting performer, if that makes sense. I haven't found it to be lacking in any category. I haven't found it to suffer in any way. It's been nice. I like too how the tip comes to kind of a precise point when you look at it this way, but it has a lot of meat left behind it. It's a pretty robust tip, so I do like how this knife feels a little bit overbuilt in like certain subtle ways, but then it also feels precise and thin and kind of compact in others. It's like this really cool balance that I wasn't necessarily expecting to find in it. What does that leave us with? Action. So action on this knife, it's thumb studs only, but it middle finger flicks. I love that. If a knife can be middle finger flicked, you can rest assured I'm going to do it. It's very comfortable, the middle finger flick. Also works really well for me with the thumb. I've had a couple friends say they really struggled with deployment on the thumb studs of this knife. I don't know if their detent was set different than mine or what, but that's not the case for me. The only case where I've had a Reat built knife that the lock bar was so sensitive that I like couldn't deploy it was the Reat Sonoma V1, Giant Mouse Sonoma V1. And that was an issue with the knife. I sent it back, and they replaced it because the lock bar was way, way, way more sensitive than it was supposed to be. So maybe that's happened on a couple people's examples, but for me, even resting my fingers on the lock bar and pressing, I don't have any issues deploying the knife. The detent still feels good. So it totally works for me, even with some pressure on the lock bar. The positioning of the thumb studs works well for me for thumb deployment and for middle finger deployment. So as thumb stud knives go, I like it quite a bit. Would I like it more if it had a slot like the Jaeger? Yeah. I prefer holes over studs for sure. That's no secret. Nah, I mean. But it works as thumb stud knives go. Thumb stud knives don't excite me as much as knives with holes, but when they're done right, they're done right, and this is a case where it's done right. On closure, not super drop shutty, but fairly droppy at the same time. It's definitely like you got to give it a few shakes or a real deliberate shake, but it works. It's not a guillotine, but it's fine. I find it more fun to deploy than to close. Most knives are that have a fun action, but some are also really fun to close. Like, not every knife is going to be the Holt haptic, but the Holt haptic, if you get your finger out of the way, is just going to drop. This isn't going to be that way, but I don't think it's really designed to be that way. So deployment's fun for a thumb stud knife. I like it. Where does that leave us? Ergos, really good. Carry, quite good. Cutting, really good. Action, pretty good. Like, everything about this knife is kind of a win in my opinion. I think it's done really well. If this was the first knife that I got from Brian Brown, I'd be probably even more impressed. The problem for me is that it lives in the shadow of the Jaeger being one of my favorite knives that I own. I just love the Jaeger so much that this knife feels like the other one, if that makes sense. And that might be fair, it might not be fair, but that's just me trying to articulate it the best I can. Like, will I keep this knife forever? Probably not. I will probably end up letting go of this knife because if I have it and the Jaeger, I'm going to carry the Jaeger. And the Jaeger is a knife I don't plan on letting go of until maybe when I get my other one, if I happen to like that spec more, because I got the Tiffany blue, or Brittany blue, I think they called it, the like fat carbon inlays, and also a non-flipper, and that one should be really, really cool too. Maybe I'll just keep both Jaegers at that point. But in the meantime, I just like the Jaeger a little bit better. But the Raptor is sick. The way that it fits my hand does feel pretty special. The way that it's just such a pleasure to carry and use. It's a great, great knife. But I just don't keep everything. I'm somebody who sells knives to keep buying new things. So I imagine this one will probably go. Which it'll be one that'll hurt to let go. And that's probably one of the biggest compliments I can give to it. So I sell and trade a lot of knives to keep getting other knives. And not all of them hurt to let go. And this one will. I really, really like it. Maybe I'll even keep it around longer than I should. Just because I'll keep enjoying it for a little bit. But it's been a pleasure to carry. Pleasure to cut with. Pleasure to use. And pleasure to play with. Maybe that's a fun little way to say that. Anyway, I like this knife a lot. It's a lot of fun. And Brian Brown is a great, awesome designer, really great maker. And it's a pleasure to call him a friend. I really like Brian a lot. So there is some bias in the sense that I like Brian. He's been on my podcast. That was a really fun episode, one of my favorite that I've ever done. And he's just a cool dude that I admire. So that's there. But I've tried to look at this knife as objectively as I can with that in mind. One thing here, let me throw in this little tidbit of negative, which I think I talked about in my unboxing or first impressions, whatever it was. This pivot is not captive on this run of Raptors. On the next run it will be, because Brian knows that that would be better. But it's not on this. So disassembly and maintenance on this knife may be a little bit more of a bummer than it would be on knives with a captive pivot. If you get lucky and it's not a bummer, then it's because you got lucky. But if it tries to give you issues when you're disassembling it, then that's not super fun. So that's kind of a flaw in this run, if you want to call it that. There, I'm more objective now. But yeah, the next run, I think Brian has already explicitly stated that the pivots will be captive. I don't know when the next run will be. I hope that he just keeps on cranking out these Riat-built production runs of his knives because they're fantastic. And it's really, really, really tough to get one of his customs. So the production line in the meantime is a lot of fun to play with. And I like seeing that he's using a couple of manufacturers now too. I'm curious about, maybe, is it called the Dutchman? I think it might be called the Dutchman. There's a little knife that's coming out that he's not using Riat for. And I think that's great that he's diversifying in that way, because I want him to come out with more and more and more stuff that a lot of people can get. So I like seeing that. Anyway, that'll be my full review on the Raptor. Super fun knife. I like it a lot. I've had a great time carrying it, using it, reviewing it, all the above. And we'll see you guys on the next one.